everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Triple Option Podcast. My name is True Douglas, along with co-hosts Nate Autry and Avi Dingery. Today we'll be talking about Week 18 of the NFL season, as well as some other NFL news, such as awards. If you do like this video, the Triple Option Podcast, as well as other videos of the Triple Option Podcast, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your friends. Now that's out of the way, let's get into it. Avi, what do we have in store for the audience today?
Well, this is probably one of the most important weeks of the NFL season, and an episode will be covering a lot of content. And quite honestly, this is going to be a very, very crazy week. Many teams that looking into this week would go into the playoffs might fall out. Many crazy upsets, crazy wins, crazy losses, many records broken, especially with this new week 18. And there's a lot to look forward to from fans and for teams. As we dive into our predictions. So, currently, as we record this, the Chiefs Broncos game is going on, but we made these picks beforehand, so these picks are not influenced by the current score of the game. As you see, we all unanimously picked the Chiefs. Tarun, would you like to explain why you picked the Chiefs?
Reason I picked Chiefs offense. The offense is so talented. I think it overbears on the Broncos defense, despite what Vic Fangio has done over there. And the Broncos rather haven't been able to perform against any team that's more than mediocre. So that's my 2 cents on the issue.
I agree. I think, like you said, the Chiefs offense is just more talented and has proven to be more successful throughout the season.
Usually, I would have picked the Broncos just because at the end of the season, the Chiefs don't have much to play for. However, with the way seeding stands, a lot of teams can fall, a lot of teams can drop, or a lot of teams can rise, and the Chiefs definitely want to rise. So I think they play their starters, and like you said, their offense is just too powerful when everyone's playing. Moving on to the NFC East showdown, Eagles and Cowboys. Drew, why did you, as a Cowboys fan, pick the Eagles?
Cowboys have faced some COVID issues on their defense. Those players should be back for the wild card game per the 7-day quarantine rule. But these players include Michael Parsons, Trevon Diggs, and some other defensive backs. Also, this game is in Philly, so with the Cowboys' one-dimensional offense with Zeke struggling, as well as a pared down defense in Philadelphia, where it's likely to be very cold. I just think all the factors play to a very tough Eagles win. I don't think the difference is going to be more than 3.
Nate, why did you pick the Cowboys with all this in mind?
While I do agree that the Cowboys will have defensive issues, given that they're missing, I think, 4 players due to COVID, I simply trust the Cowboys offense more. They've been extremely productive when they're hot this season. And I think in a game where the outcome does matter to them, because obviously they want to get a better seed in the playoffs, I think that, you know, Zeke and Dak will continue to have a good season, and I trust them more than a Philly offense that basically relies entirely on Jalen Hurts.
Respectable. Uh, Next, we have two disappointments of teams playing tomorrow. The Washington and the Giants all this unanimously picked the football team, who will be getting a new name in February.
They will?
th-
Ooh, that is
yes,
interesting.
yeah, they have announced that February 2nd, I believe, they'll be announcing their new colors, uniforms, names, everything.
So they're
Uh,
done punting
they
about.
are, yeah, they are done being the football team. So, quite exciting. The only exciting news for football team fans, other than the draft,
Other than,
potentially,
yeah, until the draft, we should
to the
say.
draft. Next, we have the Bengals and Browns, a tale of two polar opposites. The Bengals coming into the season, many thought would be terrible. Maybe Joe Burrow would not be as good with lingering injury issues, and the Browns were viewed as Super Bowl contenders. Yet here we are at the end of the season. The Bengals are currently in the race for the 1 seed in the AFC, while the Browns have no mathematical chance of getting into the playoffs. Um, as we see, we all picked the Bengals, but I'd just like to talk about the struggles of the Browns, especially with Baker Mayfield. Do you think that he will be there next year?
It's hard to tell. It depends on how much they listen to the fans, because obviously I think the organization still has a decent amount of trust in him. I mean, they've continued to start him. They haven't really had much talks about replacing him, but the fans have been extremely upset with his play. So we'll see.
What about you, Tarun? What are your opinions about Baker Mayfield staying in Cleveland long term?
Um, I think if you're the Browns with all the multiple issues this year with injuries, COVID, the whole Odell Beckham situation, I think you kind of have to give Baker Mayfield at least another year or two. Give him another chance to prove he's wrong. I wouldn't sign him to a massive deal, but again, after year 6 with that organization, if he still isn't performing, then I would release him and move on. But there isn't much quarterback talent in free agency or even the draft. Even with Matt Corral and other quarterbacks to warrant moving on from a player with as much potential as Baker Mayfield.
And again, like the Browns aren't necessarily in the best position to draft a good quarterback if they wanted to restart. So
Yeah, their pick isn't great.
They definitely would need to do a lot to go trade up. Speaking of other AFC North teams, we have the Steelers and Ravens, both fighting for a playoff spot, although a lot would need to happen for them to make it. Both teams have been battled by bad quarterback play and COVID, but now, week 18 and they're fighting each other for a playoff spot. Tarun and I picked the Steelers. Nate, why did you pick the Ravens?
um so obviously Lamar Jackson will be out in this game, and that does pose a problem for the Ravens, but I think that Ty Huntley's quarterback play has been encouraging. Obviously, in the game against Green Bay, he had over 200 yards passing. But what stood out to me the most is he had 70 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. And I think that a Ravens offense that is used to having such a dynamic quarterback as Lamar Jackson, who's obviously, great on his legs, to see him execute well on the ground, as I think that's encouraging. I think that will allow the Ravens to run their offense well, and they have a good tight end with Mark Andrews, and they have several good wide receivers. So I would, I would pick them, especially given that the Steelers' offense has been all over the place this year. They have not been consistent, and although it is Big Ben's probably last game in the NFL, unless again insane scenarios happen, I would still pick the Ravens.
Fair enough. I decided to pick the Steelers against my own intuition just because the Steelers have been a little bit hot as of recent and they're making a very unlikely playoff push. And with the whole idea of Big Ben's last season, I think they definitely want to end on a high note. And especially with Lamar being out, even though I do believe in Tyler Huntley, especially with the weapons the Ravens possess, it's a lot easier to contain a Tyler Huntley than a Lamar Jackson, at least in my opinion. Tarun, what do you have to say?
Um, I think with the Steelers Ravens game, I don't think the Ravens are going to break the streak anytime soon. And I brought up a question a couple weeks ago about how long the Ravens defense can cover their offense, and I think that dam broke a couple weeks ago, and the flood's just going to keep on coming. That's all I really have to say.
Yeah, very disappointing season for the Ravens. 5 weeks ago, they were 8-3, looking to lead the entire AFC, and now 5 weeks later, they are most likely out of it. Moving on to domestic animal abuse, Packers and Lions. We all picked the Packers. Usually, at least from what I've heard, Aaron Rodgers will be playing, and in my opinion, this might be Rodgers' last year. I think he definitely wants the MVP. He has another first round bye, and this is probably the year he goes all out to win that one more Super Bowl before potentially leaving, especially with Davante Adams not re signing yet, Jair Alexander needing a new contract, and the Packers' salary cap about to explode. Um, how far do you think this Packers team will go? Because we've seen a lot of this last year and the year before, but it's always the Packers
They'll lose in the NFC Championship.
again. Do we
Yeah,
really? What
Who do
about
you
you,
have them
Tyler?
facing in
I,
the NFC Championship?
I don't know.
That
I just know they're going to lose. That team can never like finish. Like I would like this going to sound ridiculously stupid as it probably is. I'd give the Lions a better chance to win the NFC Championship than the Packers
Well,
because the way Dan
that
Campbell coaches
okay,
that
Drew.
team is
Let's calm down
they
here.
suck, but they they play through. Like they had no reason to try this entire season. But without Dan Campbell, I think they're an 0-8 7
I mean,
team.
you're talking about a Lions team that's committed to Jared Goff as their long-term quarterback now. So I don't know.
At least they have a long term quarterback. You seriously think that
I mean,
what's the Packers
I
backup
would say that
plan?
you can make the same argument about Aaron Rodgers as you could with what Abby was saying about Big Ben. You know, again, it could be his last year in Green Bay or last year overall. And I think he would want to make that special and make a push for the playoffs. But obviously, I mean, in this particular game, it's not even that much of a conversation. The Lions have not been good in God knows how long, and
Yeah,
against a
it's
very
just
good Green Bay team, it's clear who should be the winner.
but the thing about Green Bay, it's like whenever games go beyond talent versus talent, actually come down to scheme, they seem to struggle a bit. If you look at the Bucks game last year, they made some very weird scheme decisions, especially on the offense. Offense, and while there was some questionable calls that game from the Bucks as well, I think they had called questions maybe sometimes the actual scheme once it can't rely just on talent fails. Not fails, but perhaps falls short in some ways.
I definitely think it's a good idea for the Packers to play their starters this year, the last week, because usually, at least from what we've noticed, there's always one or two guys who don't play that last week that really sell it for them in the big moments. For example, last year, infamously Kevin King did not play week 17 and then proceeded to give up the entire state of Texas in receiving yards. Um, and I think if they definitely play Rodgers, he won't be rusty, and the rest of their offense and their wide receivers. This is probably a much bigger game for the Packers than most would like to think about. Not in the sense of the win itself, but the condition their players are in. Moving on to a game that a lot of people are betting on, but not in the way you would think about it. Colts Jags. Now, while we all unanimously picked the Colts, the current Vegas favorite are the Jaguars, as the Colts have not won in Jacksonville since Andrew Luck played for them. Why did y'all pick the Colts?
I think that's kind of humorous that people are picking that. Obviously, the Jags are not a good team. I mean, their coach is gone. They haven't played well all year. But I mean, I want to say Jonathan Taylor's having arguably a offensive player of the year or running back of the year type season. So I don't know why the Jacksonville would be favored.
Colts
Yeah,
got to pull through though, because I don't think they're guaranteed a spot unless they already clinched. Because
I
Titans
mean,
have
you look at this Jacksonville team. The only thing they have going for them is what Laquan Treadwell emerging somewhat during the end of the season. But I mean, it's a very mediocre season for Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't ready to turn this program around yet in his first year.
very Peyton Manning esque first season where he's trying to do way too much.
yeah, but
Because at Clemson he's able to do that because in reality he had the talent. He had the talent around him.
I mean, Peyton Manning did also have a horrible rookie year, but Jacksonville is just something special and not in a good way. But this is from what the odds are showing and what many playoff implications pertain. Colts Jaguars is a game that every AFC team should look out for because a Colts loss opens the gate for many teams that we thought will be out of the playoffs. And it can change up a lot of the playoffs and just make everything go nuts. Moving on to the Bears and Vikings. The Bears, with Justin Fields, have somehow had some highlights of the year, some negatives. It's looking like they will be firing Matt Nagy. The city of Chicago can rejoice. Meanwhile, the Vikings, just disappointment again. Kirk Cousins had a really good year. Justin
Justin
Jefferson,
Jefferson's, yeah, he's had a great year,
insane.
but yet their record does not reflect these things.
Do you think it's time for the Vikings to fire Mike Zimmer? A guy, they've had for a very long time.
It's been
They,
time.
hmm, it's
It's
been
been
time.
time to fire him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Other than the one, I believe it was 2018 with the Minneapolis Miracle, where they had Keith Keenum, then let him go. It's not been an amazing run by Zimmer for however long he's been in Minnesota.
it's just too good of talent to waste. I think Kirk Cousins' contract comes to an end this year or is next year. He signed a massive deal in 2017 after that really good season by the Vikings, and it's been a while since then. But the Vikings' future is up in the air, and we all unanimously picked the Vikings. Moving on to another game that surprisingly has playoff implications: Titans and Texans. We all picked the Texans, sorry, Titans.
I was about to say,
Yeah,
I
we definitely did not pick the Texans. But going into the playoffs, how do you guys feel about the Titans? There's a chance they get Derrick Henry back, but there's also a chance that they don't. And we know their offense is predicated around running the ball a lot, and Derrick Henry really is the reason why they've been so good. How confident do you feel about this team going into the playoffs?
mean, I think Ryan Tannehill has kind of stepped up since the absence of Derrick Henry, and I think one player that's kind of underrated is AJ Brown. He's stepped up ever since he came back from injury. Obviously he had that massive game when he came back from injury and had I think it was 2 or 3 touchdowns. It was either way. It was a good game, and then on the other hand, you look at the running backs, and they have what's his name? A second.
Deonta Foreman, former Texas
Yeah, Deontay
Texas
Foreman.
player.
That's what they have.
Yeah, Deonta Foreman. Yeah.
Yes,
How, do you- how, do
sir.
you- how do you feel about ex Longhorn Deonta Foreman carrying the Titans to
He's
Yeah,
had a decent season. He's not gonna get a starting job anywhere. It's brutal honesty, but he's definitely earned a contract extension if that is on the table. And I'm pulling up his stats right now. So with the time he's played, he has 500 rushing yards this season. I believe he had let's see what his receiving yards are at. Okay. Yeah, so close to 650 total purpose yards, all purpose yards rather. So
that's good for a guy who hasn't really had a
because
point in his career where he is the
the
starting.
problem was when he was playing at Texas under Charlie Strong, he was the offense. He was running, I think, average of 36 times a game. Like his body was torn up by the time he got to that NFL. And a lot of people say if he was used more efficiently at Texas and not with as many carries, instead of being a third round pick, he might have been a late first round, early second.
I know that's saying a lot, honestly, because again, running backs don't really get drafted that high. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll never know really, because again, Charlie Strong did happen in Texas, and you did have to endure that.
Yeah.
Moving on to what is probably the biggest rivalry the biggest rivalry in the South when it comes to the NFL. We have the Saints and the Falcons. The Saints. Did y'all know that they called Drew Brees right before the Dolphins game to play with them? Did you hear about that?
I did not hear about. That's funny.
They called. He's like in Hawaii or something, and they called Drew Brees like, "Yo, can you come back for these last few games?" And apparently he actually thought about it, but he was already in like a different area and he couldn't make it. But crazy year for the Saints.
I mean, yeah, they've had insane inconsistency in the quarterback position. It seems like there's only been 3 or 4 quarterbacks who performed admirably,
This
quite
one's playing
honestly,
well
but
for
just
them too. So
yeah, they've had several good quarterbacks, but they just you can't stay healthy, and then COVID's been absolutely wrecking them recently.
and Taysom Hill got kind of exposed.
I mean, Taysom Hill was always reliant on his run game, and so when you play against Tampa Bay or someone like that, it just hurts.
I do feel like
What is it with the Bucks and the Saints, man? Like Tom Brady, I think just cannot get past the Saints.
there's
Oh,
some
that
tough
was just
games.
that was just an incredible performance by the Saints defense. Quite honestly, I don't know if it was scheme or something, but that was just incredible to watch.
I don't think Tom Brady has beaten the Saints since came to Tampa at all.
No,
or,
he
like,
beat
come
him in the
close to it.
playoffs,
Oh yeah, the playoffs, but
but never in the
regular
regular.
season. Mm. You know, Saints fans do have something to look forward to. Like Nate said, quarterback play was really inconsistent, but when Jameis was there, it was a positive. They were lacking Michael Thomas this year and Alvin Kamara at some stretch. When healthy, do you guys think this Saints team is for sure a playoff team?
A healthy Saints team is at least 11 wins.
And
11
again, there's
wins.
positivity that I'm looking for. I think they expect to draft a quarterback in the upcoming draft, so it's only as if they're
Hey,
Maybe not 22, but maybe 23.
anything is better than Ian Book. Anything.
I remember like checking on that game and seeing he had like 5 pass attempts and 2 interceptions. And brutal.
Brutal. You know, the
To be
Falcons.
fair, that's a very hot Dolphins team right now.
That is true. Moving on to the other side of the ball, the Falcons, though. What a year it's been for the Falcons. They were projected to win 4 games, and they lost their star wide receiver. That here they are. They had a chance at making the playoffs last week, and even though it's mathematically impossible for them to make it now, it's been a very wild ride for Matt Ryan and his Falcons.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all picked the
Yeah.
Saints. No one really believes in the Falcons. I think it's time for them to rebuild. Currently, there are rumors of Calvin Ridley getting traded, whether it be to like a team like the Eagles or the Dolphins, just a team with like Alabama connections.
Or was it New England rumors,
Yeah,
which would be interesting considering they don't really have a wide receiver right now.
there's definitely a lot to look towards though in the Falcons' future, especially with Matt Ryan being a very good quarterback. But it's time to move on. Moving on to two teams that have had a good rivalry, but one obviously has fallen off. The Seahawks and the Cardinals. The Cardinals currently playing for a chance to, I think, win the NFC West, if that's still a possibility, or at least clinch their playoff positioning. Tarun, you picked the Cardinals. What's up?
What's up?
The only reason I picked Cardinals is I have no trust in the Seahawks at this point. That's really about it.
I would have probably said the same thing about 3 weeks ago, but seeing how they performed recently, I mean, DK Metcalf, if Seahawks finally like remember that he's a good wide receiver, Russell Wilson kind of picked it up a little bit. I'd say they have a little bit of momentum going into this game, and
No, but
I mean they are fighting for pride, but in what could be the last game for Russ in Seattle, I I can't help but pick DK and Russ.
well, yeah, but like I think the Cardinals kind of got their mojo back with the Cowboys win.
Yeah, it's definitely. Their games are always close, regardless of how bad each team is. I remember the year that they were getting Kyler, and the Rams were like very good. The games were still close, and I definitely think it'll be like a 3-point game. Um, like Nate said, though, that momentum will definitely carry over against a Cardinals team that has fallen off quite a bit. I think they started off the year somewhat close to 8-0, and now they've fallen far from that, though.
Yeah, they were the last undefeated team in the NFL, but they
Definitely a
kind
game to
of
watch
fell
out
off
for.
rapidly.
Definitely a game to watch out for. Another game that surprisingly has playoff implications. Jets and Bills. Zachary Wilson looking like a turnover machine for the first half of the year, but slowly starting to pick it up versus a very surprising Bills team, as one would say. Their offensive identity and their defensive identity have definitely shifted a little bit, and it's a very exciting team looking into the playoffs. We all picked the Bills, but how confident are you guys in the Bills with their recent victories?
Pretty confident. I think they're embracing all the talent that they do have, and
I will say that
that's really
I personally did want to pick the Jets. I just couldn't. I don't have that confidence, although they have been playing better as of late. I don't have that confidence in Zach Wilson. I've been scarred by trying to follow Elijah Moore's rookie season and seeing him just constantly get missed on throws or not thrown to. But again, the Bills have been a good team. Josh Allen's a great quarterback. So yeah.
Doesn't Panthers and Bucks, not much to say there. Doesn't really have that much playoff implications. Uh, but the Panthers are definitely a disappointing team, while the Bucks are Super Bowl contenders, reigning champs. Moving on to, I think, the last three games that have playoff implications: Patriots, Dolphins, 49ers, Rams, and Chargers, Raiders. Let's talk about the Patriots though. Was a play to have the one seed, the first time they've had that without Tom Brady. Uh, Tarun, you picked the Dolphins. Why do you say that?
the only reason I picked the Dolphins. They're very hot right now, and I know I'm leaning very heavily into momentum in these predictions, but I think that plays a big role.
Nate, why did you pick the Patriots?
I don't know. I've just kind of liked how Mac Jones has gradually progressed this year. I think he's had he's worthy of consideration for Rookie of the Year, and I do trust him more than I trust the Dolphins, especially considering like how inconsistent Tua has been this year, whether it be injury or just performance. So yeah,
Speaking of Tua, though, do you think the Dolphins should consider moving on from him? It's been a very
No,
rocky start. Why so?
I think he isn't a, a great statistical quarterback. They definitely figured him out within that within their offense. I would say.
Hmm.
Like I'm pulling up his stats right now. Okay.
Because I know a lot of
So,
Dolphins fans who are split between trading for Deshaun Watson or something else,
but
like another
Deshaun Watson
quarterback.
is still a big unknown because you don't even know if he's ever going to play again.
we don't know how that case is working out at the moment. So
But okay, moving on to I think the biggest game for every team, for not every team, but the biggest game with playoff implications: 49ers Rams. Not only just because of the said playoff implications, but will Cooper Cup set multiple records? He's currently, I think, 11 catches away from breaking Michael Thomas's reception record, a few hundred, like 100 or something yards away from breaking Calvin Johnson's receiving yard record, and nowhere close to breaking the touchdown record, but still leading the league in touchdowns. It'll be the first time in a few years since a receiver has had the wide receiver triple crown. So, what do you think turns up with this game? Do you think the 49ers will dominate the Rams like they have in the past, or do you think Matthew Stafford just heaves at the Cooper Cup and he just dominates again?
I think it's weird. It's like Matthew Stafford did not get selected to the Pro Bowl, and then his play dropped off drastically. But do you guys agree with that? I kind of see like that's how a trend I've been noticing.
Yeah, he's
um,
definitely faltered for sure.
that might not be necessarily related to the Pro Bowl. Just like
Oh,
a
it's
lot of
definitely a
quarterbacks
causation. I'm
play.
just saying that it kind of seems like something that's happened.
I feel like you could find similar stats for other quarterbacks as the playoffs loom closer. You might want to either preserve your body and prevent injury, and not may be throwing your entire ability out there, or not really sure.
One thing to note though is the Rams are 12-4, and with a win, they will most likely clinch the 2 seed, which will be very important in what they hope to be a long playoff run and potentially a Super Bowl victory. But I know currently the odds are for the 49ers to win. Had a very interesting season with revolving quarterback play, running backs, and just overall craziness. But I think we all picked the Rams here. And moving on to, I think, the most interesting out of all these.
Oh, I will say one thing about the Rams really quick just before we go,
Sorry.
and that is that Cam Akers has seemingly out of nowhere, he's been taken off the IR. He's on the roster. He didn't play last week, and he may not play this week, but the mere fact that he's able to recover from an ACL injury and over just the course of a season is insane. And it'll be interesting to see if he factors into the playoffs going forward.
For sure. Last game, Chargers and Raiders. There's a possibility that both teams make the playoffs if they tie. But very interesting season for both teams. The Raiders with all of that. But Tarun, why did you pick the Chargers?
I picked the Chargers for the simple reason that I think while the Raiders have definitely surprised a lot of us with playing so well despite having an interim head coach, I think while the Chargers team has been inconsistent, I think they're overall better than this Raiders team, and a lot of it's a gut feeling.
I will say, Derek Carr, after starting off the season at a ridiculous pace, he was getting MVP hype for a while. He definitely dropped off. He's been very inconsistent. He's almost like guaranteed to get a turnover every game, and he hasn't had many multiple touchdown games. He's been struggling this season. And again, you have Josh Jacobs, who he's had a good season, a decent season, but he's not a top tier running back. Is Eckler available for this game?
I think Eckler will be playing this game. I think the Chargers are somewhat healthy.
Well, I think that one thing that was interesting is even when Eckler was out, the Chargers still had good offensive play. They saw a great. Who was the guy that stepped in? I can't remember. I'm slipping on names here.
Josh Jackson or like Joshua Palmer, one of those guys, some Joshua or Justin, something like that. But yeah, I do know what you mean. The Chargers have had some injuries throughout the year, but have still maintained, or somehow maintained being afloat. Just a quick note: Derek Carr has 4,600 passing yards with only 21 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. So
Yeah, it's been a mystery. He's been extremely productive this year over the air. It's just he hasn't been able to score. And that's due to his turnovers, which has been a big problem this year. Hunter Renfrow did get a 1,000-yard season this year, and so he has emerged as a solid wide receiver in the NFL coming out of Clemson. But yeah.
Speaking of another Clemson receiver in this game, though, Mike Williams having a very, very big year. Finally breaking out. It is a contract year, but regardless, he's turned into a very good receiver and very important to the Chargers offense, especially with Justin Herbert having an amazing season. 4,600 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Very good for a sophomore.
And there was a lot of. You just say sophomore. That's funny.
Well, yeah,
I don't think like that.
Sophomore in the NFL, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But anyways, there's a lot of concern of the beginning of the year as he wasn't getting any deep targets, which that's his main skill set. That's what he's suited to do with his skill set. But he's picked it up as the season went on. He's had a very productive season.